So for this next interview, we're going to bring on Nick from ENS to talk about how ENS has kind of evolved from where it started to where it is now. All of us have seen anywhere from something.ens or .eth on our Twitter profiles to other Farcaster or Lens profiles or just everywhere else on the internet. And there's a lot more to dig into that in the world of decentralized domain names. So to kind of cover all of this, I want to bring on Nick to have this chat. So please welcome Nick on stage. Nick, it's exciting to be talking to you here. I know it's you don't get to do a lot of these chats often, so we're honored to have this opportunity.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So most people don't know this, but ENS is one of the longest running projects in the world of Ethereum. It's been around for a lot of years. And the thing I'm curious about is, did you imagine this is how things would end up? And was this ever exactly the goal and where you wanted to be? Or how much was that from this is cool to, oh my God, we're running a $500 million protocol now?
Yeah, I think that's been a startling transition. ENS is far from the first thing I built, and everything I build, like I hope it'll succeed. But most things are modestly successful, and then to have something like this just take off, both apply, is pretty remarkable. I think. All the time I spent building things that were only modestly successful has served me well in knowing how to build a good protocol and so forth, and it all contributes.
That's awesome. Could you share any early day stories of how this was and kind of back in 2016 when we were thinking about this as a protocol? What was kind of the intention back then, and would you say that's still the current definition of what ENS is?
Well, I've always been interested in infrastructure, and back from when I was sort of age 12 and discovered RFCs exist, and that was my idea of some good bedtime reading, just about, up until the current day, and particularly interested in things like DNS and the sort of the infrastructure that makes the internet work. And so when I came along to crypto and saw that we were basically back to the 1970s in terms of usability, it was one of the first things to occur to me was we need a better solution for this. And so I started building it pretty much as soon as I got involved with Ethereum. The very first version was very much an imitation of DNS. It was almost just importing it wholesale into Ethereum. But I quickly revised that and built on it to leverage the unique advantages of Ethereum over, the 1970s internet in order to build something that was better suited to Ethereum and to crypto. I think initially we were very focused on crypto identifiers exclusively, so resolving Ethereum addresses, resolving swarm content hashes. But we've sort of realized that the utility in a naming service is much broader than that and been expanding on it since.
Awesome. Well, kind of from a fun project when you were doing this thing on your own to kind of where it is now. Maybe by show of hands, who here owns an ENS name? That's 70%.
Yeah. Can I ask who here owns an ENS name that isn't a .eth second level name? So Coinbase ID, Uniswap, etc. That's great to see, and I think over time that proportion is going to go way up.
Absolutely. But the cool thing here is that it's not just we're crypto people and that's how we're doing these things. It has actually become mainstream. You recently had a large partnership with GoDaddy. Tell us about what that partnership entails and how that came to be.
So what it entails is anyone with a DNS name, which is any name in that you typically buy from a DNS registrar, like GoDaddy, can now enable that name for Ethereum and for ENS with basically a single click on the GoDaddy site. So if you register through them, you can go in, you can set it up, you enter your Ethereum address, and presto, it all works. And the best thing about it is there's no gas fees, and it's not that ENS and GoDaddy are paying the gas fees behind the scenes, it's that there is actually no gas fees. The whole thing is done with 0 on-chain transactions, but still with no additional trust assumptions over what you get from Ethereum plus the DNS route.
That's awesome. How is it possible to do this without gas?
So through something called CCIP-Read, which is a protocol for fetching data from off-chain for smart contracts. So what happens behind the scenes is when you go to resolve, joe.cb.id, for instance, it goes off and starts the ENS resolution. The ENS resolver contract says, wait, I need more data to resolve this. Please go consult this gateway server. And this gateway server happens to understand DNS, and it understands how to actually query that DNS name and fetch the text records. It returns those to the client, which gives them back to the resolver contract saying, here's the data you asked for, and it's then responsible for verifying it and decoding the result. And the remarkable thing about this is that the client that's doing the name resolving doesn't have to understand any of this. It's all just, here, please go fetch this message for me and give it back. You don't have to understand the content of it. And there's no trust assumptions because the contract is able to verify the data. So in this case, you're relying on the DNS hierarchy, but you already were in order to have a DNS name. And you can simply, as long as that assumption holds true, there's nothing additional to trust in using your domain in this way. So that means the gateway can't lie either.
So the thing I guess I'm curious about, I think you did answer this thing, and we're totally going on a tangent, but purely out of my curiosity, is this not a scenario where you can still tamper with the data that you're giving back to the contract?
So what we actually implemented is a complete DNSSEC verifier for the EVM. So DNSSEC, for those who are not familiar, is kind of like TLS or SSL, but for domain names. It implements a chain of trust similar to a certificate hierarchy. It starts at the root and works its way down, and as long as you verify all the signatures at each layer, you can verify that the DNS response is correct. So what we actually have is an Ethereum smart contract that can resolve DNS records securely. And so the gateway implements the sort of packaging that up and handing it back.
Verification is still on chain, I see.
Yeah, exactly. But it's done in a call rather than a transaction, so there's no gas fee.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's awesome. I do want to dig into sort of the DNS pieces, but only in a couple minutes. One thing that is kind of interesting here is that anytime you want to register a domain name or ENS name, you kind of have to pay a fee, and just like a domain name has a recurring fee, and you have to do that and renew it every year. And the thing I guess I'm curious about is, like, was there any other reason for having a similar mechanism for ENS here when you kind of had the opportunity to effectively do more creative things with money being native as part of the protocol, or was there the obvious reason being we just needed the money here to sustain this long term, and this is the only way you could have implemented this thing? What was kind of the thinking around charging for these names?
The first priority is definitely an incentive design, a mechanism design approach. If names were free, then they would have all been grabbed up and resold and therefore wouldn't be free. And if they were a one-time charge, then you would have a similar issue where effectively, everything useful ends up on the resale market. And you also, you're making it cheaper for people who want to buy and resell a name, and proportionally more expensive for people who actually want to use the name. Whereas, building a renewal fee system prioritizes the right users, we believe. It doesn't hurt that it also helps the sustainability of the platform and the protocol, of course.
Has there been any changes to how you've thought about fees since the origins?
So the very first version of the registrar, we weren't decided on fee structure and so forth. So what we did is we implemented a Vickrey auction, and the winners.
What's that for our audience?
Vickrey auction is a blind auction. So you put in a bid for how much you're willing to pay, but it's secret. At the end of the auction, all the bids are revealed. The person who bid the most gets the name, but they only pay as much as the second highest bid. And the insight here is that with a system like that, you are incentivized to bid your true maximum because you know that you'll only pay someone else's true maximum. And the crucial factor here was that with the original version, that money wasn't actually sent to a multi-sig or the eventual DAO or anything. It was actually just locked. So if you relinquished the name, you would get the deposit back. And So after 2 years, we moved to the permanent registrar, and that implemented the now well-known annual renewal system. And anyone who held on to their name for that 2 years could transition to that, got a year's free registration, and also got their original deposit back.
I remember losing a lot of money on my initial domain name registrations. So kind of coming back to the DNS pieces, why is it important for you to think about and maintain DNS compatibility? Obviously, we're in our own world with .eth TLDs, and it works in the context of our blockchains, but why should it matter that anybody else knows about this?
So naming is ultimately a usability issue, and where usability is bad, scams and so on prosper. And I believe it's really important that when somebody types in, foo.eth, they shouldn't have to worry about, am I using the same .eth as my friend who gave the name to me? Is there going to be a collision between these two? Maybe these names resolve fine, but this other one doesn't because it's doing some sort of fall-through mechanism and so forth. And so I believe it's really important to the greatest degree possible to have a unified namespace. And so we believe that the best way to do that is with DNS, because we also believe that ignoring existing technology is not the best approach. Building on top of it, improving it is very much in the spirit of the internet. Every new technology has succeeded by embracing and enhancing previous ones.
I mean, I absolutely respect that. Has there been any kind of unintended kind of side effects of ensuring this?
I think, it imposes some restrictions upon us. At times it may have been very convenient if we could just launch a new TLD. If we could say, we're going to launch on this other chain, and convenience, technically it's much easier if we just have like a whole new namespace, with a different extension. Doing this properly forces us into some more difficult technical choices, and to do it the right way the first time rather than the easy way.
How do you think about now kind of the emergence of a lot more new TLDs? So we obviously talked about the Coinbase CB.ID, which again is compatible, actually is part of ENS. But we're seeing a lot of other new TLDs appear. How should we think about breaking compatibility, or rather not breaking compatibility, like them breaking compatibility as more and more of these things appear? And what should people keep in mind as they see a lot of these things come up to them?
Yeah, it's really tough, and it's, I guess my first, obviously self-serving note is to try not to legitimize the obvious copycats, the ones who are basically taking an existing project, minting their own TLD, and have no concern of their own for avoiding these sort of collisions. But obviously, just like everybody should just use ENS, and we're fine, is not necessarily a sustainable position. I think that, each of these projects needs to be looking at what they're doing to minimize their overlap, and that can be through minimizing the number of TLDs they create, like ENS has. It can be through choosing TLDs that they know won't be issued globally. It can also be just through using different syntaxes for their naming systems. You don't have to use dots separated for everything if you're building your own name system. Whatever you do, I think you should be looking at, assuming that people are going to, have multiple naming systems around, and making sure that under no circumstances can you get two different people into the same name into different wallets and get different results.
And I mean, it only gets more complicated when now people can just bid for their custom TLDs in the real world now for DNS. Let's kind of change some topics. Obviously, there's a lot more to still do on the protocol side. So the thing I'm curious about is how do you usually interact with the ENS DAO and the rest of the community? How do they usually influence the direction of the protocol, whether it's features or fixes or just getting general feedback? What is that process like?
I think it's been sort of more organic and less sort of proposal driven than I might have anticipated. A lot of the a lot of the benefit from the DAO has been having a highly involved and vocal community who provide the sort of feedback that when you're creating a new project, you go out there and you say, please give me some feedback on this idea, and you get radio silence, and then you build it, and then a year later somebody's like, oh, you should have done that, and you're like, well, great, where were you a year ago? But with an active community, with the DAO, we've been able to get really incredible both sort of technical and non-technical and usability feedback and build things better the first time. And that's been a much more organic process than just saying, oh, somebody put forward a proposal to, change this parameter to this value. There's certainly been a degree of that, and that's led to measurable improvements. But I think the input from the community is what I've really valued.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a very healthy sign of an ecosystem that wants this to succeed. What does this change in terms of your role as ENS Labs?
I think ENS's process through the whole period since launch has been gradual decentralization. I think we're pretty damn decentralized by this point, with all the protocol being governed by the DAO. But ENS Labs need not be the only service provider building infrastructure for ENS, and we see that.
You intentionally don't want this, is that right?
Yeah, okay. I think we're really smart. I think we're good at what we do, and I think we'll keep building good tech. But I think there's room for more than one set of builders, and innovating on the platform. And the recent approval of the streaming funds, which was incidentally something that came entirely from outside the DAO, from Alex van der Sand, demonstrates that the ENS DAO is ready for that too.
That's amazing. I do want to I do want to wrap up, but I do have a couple other questions here. One is, what's kind of making it hard right now for ENS to be more readily available on different L2s? And what should we be thinking about, especially as we see hundreds and hundreds of these chains pop up in the next year?
So our short-term approach has always been that just like most people use a gmail.com or Outlook or whatever email address, most people don't buy their own second-level domains to represent them. And so our focus has been on making it easy and cheap and secure and trust minimized for people to buy second-level names like cb.id, like uni.eth, etc., and to make that as efficient as possible. In the longer term, we are looking at moving more infrastructure off-chain in order to minimize the on-chain costs, but our focus really is on onboarding the next million users and making that as easy as possible rather than just optimizing what we have.
Is that a stance you're taking on? You want to just get the next million users to be on Ethereum Mainnet, and then that's kind of the priority, or is it just overall ENS users is what matters, and if that means you do the cb.id approach and have other chains spin up these identity platforms, that's the way to go, or what's the stance that ENS itself takes here?
Yeah, we want them to be using these, these second-level integrations, things that utilize L2s for issuing subdomains, things that utilize off-chain solutions, and so forth.
Got it. And maybe kind of my final question here is, what is currently missing from DNS, whether the protocol or your ecosystem, and what can we look forward to from the community or ENS Labs?
I think the more maturity in the L2 space, which is rapidly changing, but I would love to see, ZK-based rollups further along to the point where it's easier for us to integrate with them and provide that to users. And in terms of what you can expect is, a lot more work in that direction, both from us and partnerships with teams to sort of build out the infrastructure needed.
Awesome. Well, Nick, thank you so much for this conversation, and can't wait to have a few million more people use ENS. And for the 30% who did not raise their hands, don't worry, we'll get you an ENS domain name by the end of next week.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Nick.